Hello everyone, welcome back. This is the second part in our three-part Tiffany style or Tiffany inspired settings. So let's jump into this one. I'm gonna go ahead and save my project this time. Tiffany 2 recording. There we go. Just so I don't forget. And then we are going to jump right into the jeweler's bench and create our ring size like we usually do. Size 7 is my go-to, unless I'm making a specific size for somebody. And we'll leave the offset for the top plane alone for now. Once we get our image in there, we'll adjust it. So just like in the first video, I have an image to work from. You don't need this, of course, but you can if it helps with the design. We're going to place this in the OXZ plane, image in plane, load our image, and from the front view, we can scale and move it around until it starts to fit. A little more. There we go. Okay, and then we're going to right click and freeze that image so it stays there. And then we'll go ahead and adjust our top plane by double clicking back in the ring size builder and place our girdle height for our stone. Okay, so now we'll select the ring size, jump back to the jeweler's bench, and create our stone. Okay, so this one, it looks to be about 1 carat. Of course, make it any size you want, just adjust your curves and sketches to match. We'll go ahead and validate that. And now we're ready to, well, first we need to set up a plane again if you want to keep it parametric so that your curves are at least positioned to the stone when you move the stone around. They'll stay where they're supposed to be with little adjustments needed. So I'm going to select that stone, back to the solid module. We're going to do a plane from a curve, and we're going to make that at the 0.25, the quarter mark in this case. That's where we want it. Orientation looks good, so I don't need to rotate it. Just scale this down a bit. Okay, and then validate that. Okay, and then we'll just create our sketch in that custom plane. Okay, now we're going to draw the cutout shape that we're going to cut out our, we're going to draw our bezel first before we can cut it out. So let's start with a NURBS curve, and starting right up here where we want the outside curve to be. And we're just going to draw in our shape. Now we want to come to that 0 line of the original planes, not this sketch plane working because it's off center. We need to stop right on the inside of that line there. You can hide your grid if you want to see that axis line a little clearer. That's the 0 point that we're going to be rotating around, so not around this sketch, but around the default Z plane axis. You don't want to cross this line. You can get it pretty darn close. Just make sure you're on the left side of it. If you cross over to the right side, you're going to get a crisscross there. You might have some bad geometry. So just get it pretty close. And then for the inside of the bezel, we're going to do the same thing, another NURBS curve. I'm going to hover for the track line and then click my first point there so it's even with the top of the outside of the bezel, and then just bring that in. Same way, we can also hover the track line and snap that one as well so the inside is even, and then validate that. So for the top of our prong here, we're just going to do a straight line to connect those two together, and then using auto connect to just automatically connect those three. Okay, so we can exit our sketch and then select that curve, and we're just going to do our rotation, so a revolve, and change the axis to the OZ. And like I said, as long as we're pretty close, this will cap off. It'll be solid. We won't have any crisscrossing there. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to go back into that sketch. So the only sketch here, number 1. And this would be a good time. I'm going to rename this curve number 1 so we can recognize it later. You may have to make some adjustments to your curves as you change the stone size or the ring size. So it's easy if we label them to come back to them later. So this is the bezel curve. And then I'll just go ahead and hide it out of the way for now. Okay, so now we need to do our cutout. So we're going to use a symmetrical shape for that, symmetrical vertical curve plane. Now you'll notice because we're working this custom sketch, my center point is not based on the default global axis and planes there. It's based on this sketch's center. That's okay. We're going to go ahead and rough it out over here. So the cool thing about these parametric curves inside the sketch model is you can move them and keep their parameters, in this case the symmetry. Turn my grid back on so I can recenter it where it's supposed to be and then make my symmetrical adjustments. It's a nice little trick for you. Okay, now I'm not sure how wide to make this. I'm going to do a 4-prong setting. I think the picture is 6, but just to change it up on this one. If you want to do 6, of course, make this thinner so your cutouts are thinner, and then just do 6 copies instead of 4 later. So go ahead and validate that for now. We're going to exit the sketch module, and we're going to select that new curve. I'm going to go ahead and rename that while I'm thinking about it. That is our bezel cutout. So in case we need to adjust it later, we can find it easy. So while that's selected, we're going to do an extrusion. Just a one-sided extrusion. We're going to pull it through the side of the bezel. As long as it's sticking through, that's plenty. Go ahead and validate that. And I'm going to hide this image for a little while so you can see a little clearer what I'm doing. And we're going to select that extrusion. And now if we leave it as it is, when we do our duplication, we're going to end up with these V-shaped prongs or triangle-shaped prongs. They get really narrow on the inside. So what we can do is, to make this fit nicer, is taper it. So we're going to select it and go down to Deform, Taper. We're going to select the indicator on the back side of the model, and we're going to squish it. That way it's coming across at the same angle as the cutouts that we want. Go ahead and validate that. Okay, now we can do our circular duplication. And because I'm doing 4 prongs, we're going to do 4 copies. Like I said, if you want 6 prongs, you'll do 3 copies, 8 prongs, 4 copies, etc. A little math. But go ahead and validate that at 4. That's perfect. And now we can see that my prongs are a little wide. It depends on how wide I want them, but that's where we can go back and find my bezel cutout curve. And we'll just make this a little bit wider. Reload until we get the shape of the prongs we want. That looks pretty good. Okay, so validate that, back out of the sketch and save. So we're going to do a pretty major Boolean here. This Boolean should go fine. The crisscrossing that's happening in the middle of this aren't really part of the Boolean, but they can affect it sometimes. So if that happens, what you'll do is ungroup these and maybe move one up slightly, just a hair, so that they're not crisscrossing in the middle. Depends on how much they're touching that bottom surface. So you might have to make some adjustments, but try it out normal at first. Like I said, if it has a problem, usually it'll move those surfaces if it has to. So that came out rather well. We can check with our polygon conversion. Make sure we have display errors in our custom settings. Preview that just to make sure there's no red marks. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to save again. Now you can attempt to fillet this. They're going to be hit or miss with these fillets. There's some sharp corners. Some are less than 90 degrees. Those are really hard to fillet around. You want to pick and choose your battles with fillets. I do want to try to fillet these outside edges. I would definitely not even attempt to do the inside edges. There's a lot of crisscrossing edges in there. I don't care too much about these tops being filleted because we know those are going to be finished in the setting. It's going to get pounded on and moved around. So now if the rendering is important, we might have to play around with our cutouts and get a nice clean fillet on there. But for just production, should be fine. We want to leave this fillet pretty small, 0.1. If you go too high, it will break those edges. There we go. So we see my material turned a funny darker color. So that is just the material stretching out. It should be fine geometry-wise, but again, polygon conversion and preview, just to make sure that didn't break anything. So yeah, it's fine. All right, so that part of our setting is done. We have a little bit more design work to do in here. I'm going to go back into that sketch. And we see that this design has a little bit of a cutout down here at the bottom. Just based on the image, you can do whatever you want here. So I'm going to do a little shape like that and then recenter it where it's supposed to be. I'm using that Z line, the OZ axis line to line that up. And then I should probably move it up where I want to cut out. There you go. And then we can adjust it for the shape we want. something like that. Okay, and then this one is just a straight extrusion on both sides, so we're going to pull that all the way through, do both sides. We don't need one from the side because that'll be covered up by the shank, the ring. So we're going to do a Boolean again, the bezel first, and then the cutout, Boolean subtract. Okay, so that did break. So I'm guessing that fillet is affecting it more than I thought it should. Let's come back to that fillet. So let's go ahead and undo that fillet for now. If your fillet's working, everything's clean, it's still cutting, just leave it in there. But we're going to attempt to take care of that later. Like I said, fillets can be finicky when you have a lot of cutouts like this. Okay, so that cutout's fine. It was the fillet breaking it. So let's just leave the fillet off. If we can, we'll go back and add the fillet, maybe even after we're ready to just export it. So that's pretty much it for the setting. So in that case, yeah, let's try the fillet now. So again, I'm just going to do these edges. I see we've got a seam here that might be causing the fillet issue. But let's see. Yeah, it's not breaking the geometry, but it's definitely affecting the piece. So if you're not cutting it anymore, you can leave it as is. Like I said, it may affect the rendering a little bit, but it doesn't affect the production model. Okay, so let's go ahead and finish this up with a shank. The shank on this one is a little different than the other one. We're going to do just a solid shank and then cut out the place we need to cut it out, and then add a little under piece to hold it all together. So let's just do that with a simple 3-rail builder. I'm going to go ahead and draw I'm going to use the same sketch here. We can rename this other curve while we're at it. This would be the bottom bezel cutout. Okay, so I'm just going to draw my shape over here somewhere. So this is pretty much just going to be a half round, something like that. And we're going to do a 3-rail sweep, so the size of that doesn't matter. Exit your sketch again, and we're going to select our ring size builder, and we're just going to start our 3-rail builder. So ring rail builder, we're going to set our offsets and angles as needed. A little top heavy. And then second tab, side view, whatever shape from the side we want. Again, this is all up to you. Something like that. And then the third tab, since we have our section ready, you can also pull one from the library if you don't want to draw your own. And we can preview that. And that's exactly what I want. Validate. And we're going to go back in for our cutout. So I'm, again, just putting everything in one sketch and just labeling everything. I'm going to go ahead and hide these other ones for now. We can rename curve 3. That is our ring shape or section. And we'll hide that as well. Sometimes organizing is good. And we're going to create our cutout. Now that I have that other metal in there, that fillet does look really bad, so we'll go back and remove that for now. So, again, just a cutout shape, and then we can recenter it. And I want to freeze this ring so I can see what I'm cutting out here. And it's pretty much going to match the shape of our bezel. Actually, we can just match it pretty closely. There we go. Okay, so find our ring, show, and rename curve 4 here. That would be our shank cutout. And then we're going to select that and the ring, and we can just do a crop and punch this time since we're just cutting straight across. crop that out of there. There we go. So let's undo that. There we go. Okay, so now that we built that, I see my ring's a little wider than I expected. We have our ring rail builder still hidden in the tree. So go back and just clean up and make any adjustments you want. Reload. There we go. Something like that. So again, we can produce these as 2 separate pieces if you want to be able to polish inside of there and then weld it together, things like that. But again, just as a very simple shank example, I wanted to focus more on the settings in these videos. So that's pretty much it. So stay tuned for the 3rd video. We're going to use 3Shaper to do something similar to this, but have it more of a sculpted, blended look. So join me back for that one.